Calling to order this meeting of the Bloomington Transportation Commission planning session. Can we start with the roll call?
Connell? Here. Flaherty?
Here.
Binder?
Here.
Davis?
Here.
And Stossberg.
Here. Great. Next is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
No minutes for this one. Sorry for the. What was that? There's no meeting minutes for the planning session yet.
All right, great. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the main item, a presentation for the Rogers-Madison-Kinzer corridor.
Yeah, I will give a quick update and throw it to Drew Parker from Tool Design for the presentation. Since we last met, there's been a number of activities that we've been doing, primarily centered around community engagement. Drew will go into more details about what we've been doing, but essentially we have been talking to different stakeholders in the community, businesses, property owners, members of the public, street users, to talk about what's going on in the corridor. How do you use it? How would you like to use it? What's going right? What's going wrong? And how street or infrastructure changes in this corridor study could help their experience along the street. From there, that engagement has informed initial design sketches and concepts that you all will see. We'll have an opportunity to review, talk about, discuss, ask questions, and that will then steer the next month or two of this study in terms of starting to hone in on specific designs that we would like to move forward with to possibly include in the final corridor study. With that, I will throw it over to Drew to say some more.
Thanks, Hank. I'll share my screen here. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for confirming, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Drew Parker. I'm a senior planner with Tool Design, and I'm the consultant project manager for this corridor study. So excited to be here for our third of 4 Transportation Commission meetings. Like Hank said, I'll give a recap of some of the engagement that we did in March, and then I'll talk a little bit about the design objectives, which we covered in the last Transportation Commission meeting, and then I'll also go into some of those design concepts, those sketches that Hank was talking about. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Just as a reminder on project overview, this is our third of 4 Transportation Commission meetings. We started this project back in October, and we expect to be done kind of late summer, probably in the August timeframe, I would think. And like Hank said, a big part of our engagement and intensive work all happened during workshop week, which was March 23rd to 27th. So we've kind of been organizing all the materials since then, picking up the pieces, collating all of that public engagement, comment, and feedback that we've gotten, and turn that into some recommendations for initial ideas for concepts. So let's go through a recap of that engagement in March. During workshop week, we had a lot of different opportunities for members of the public to come out and talk to us. So we had an open house in the evening at Switchyard Park on March 25th, and then we had various pop-up events throughout the week that were just kind of like popping up along the Beeline Trail, places along Rogers Street, along the corridor, just talking to people as they walk by, engage them in a quick, 1-minute activity. So you can see an example of that. On the right side of the slide here, we had a really simple question about what are the top 3 things that make it difficult to walk, bike, or drive on Rogers Street. And so then if people want to stick around, they could engage with us further, but it was really just a way to get quick feedback from folks. There was also an online survey hosted on the city's website concurrently with this in-person engagement, so we got a lot of feedback from that as well. From the pop-ups, we got 4 to 20 participants per location, on average 15 people per pop-up during the week. And the top things that we heard is people had concerns about unsafe intersections and crossings, walking and biking too close to traffic, and then speeding and aggressive driving. And this is pretty consistent with what we heard during other activities throughout workshop week and in the survey. Really, people were talking about how it's hard to cross the street and how it doesn't feel very comfortable to walk or bike along Rogers Street. So here's just another set of photos showing you what that activity looked like and all the different places that we set this pop-up up around town during the week. So during that same time frame, we also had the online survey, and we got 106 respondents to the online survey with a 73% completion rate and 57 map-based comments that people, dropped pins and said, "This is my concern specifically at this intersection or mid-block location." From the survey results, 74% of folks lived along or near the corridor, 59% regularly visit destinations along the corridor, and 23% work along or near the corridor. And the vast majority of people travel on Rogers Street daily. That's what that second question is asking about. So these are people that know the corridor really well. We also asked what modes of travel do you use on Rogers Street, and people were allowed to select multiple choices. So the top choice was driving. 95% of people drive along Rogers Street, followed by walking or rolling at 67%, and then biking, scooting, or skateboarding at 53%, and then it kind of goes down from there. We also asked what modes of travel would you prefer to use on the corridor if you want to use a different mode. So 22% said, I prefer my typical travel method. How I travel on Rogers is fine by me. But the next option up was 16% of people said that they would like to bike, ride a scooter, or skateboard on Rogers Street. And then we also asked people what makes it difficult to use the corridor. I've highlighted the top 5 answers here, which kind of is starting to build this theme of what we've been hearing from the public. So poor driver behavior, speeding, so people have concerns about people driving too quickly on the corridor. Unsafe intersections or crossings, so same thing we asked the pop-ups. Difficulty crossing the street, it's uncomfortable to walk or bike on the street, and there's a lack of bike lanes, paths, or trails along the street. So people are really feeling like the speeds are too high, it doesn't feel comfortable to walk there, and it's hard to cross the street. Kind of the main things we kept hearing. We also asked people, do you feel safe and comfortable driving on this corridor, or do you feel safe and comfortable biking on this corridor? And we basically got the exact opposite results. So people feel somewhat or very safe driving on the corridor. You can see the vast majority of people in green there felt safe driving, but the vast majority of people that do bike don't feel safe. They feel very unsafe or somewhat unsafe biking along on the corridor, and very few people feel safe and comfortable biking along the corridor, which makes sense. There's not really great bicycling facilities along the corridor. So we also asked, when you're driving along this corridor, what's most important to your comfort and safety? And the top results were people like smooth pavement, they like separation between cars and people, so having separate space for people driving, biking, and walking. People also said they wanted reduced vehicle speeds or traffic calming, that would make them feel more comfortable driving, and then having sight lines free of obstructions. So the top 4 things people said about driving. We also asked that same question about walking, biking, or waiting for transit, and people said the top things that are most important to them are having a buffer from traffic, so separation between either the bike lane or the sidewalk from cars, having marked pedestrian crossings, so more places to cross, separated walking and biking paths, having more street trees and shade, and lighting at night. So it's really, a lot of what we heard was, we want to reduce speeds, we want to have a more comfortable pedestrian environment, and more opportunities and places where we can cross the street safely. We also asked in the online survey about specific locations, so we got 106 comments with different locations, and then for the in-person engagement, we also allowed people to place sticky notes or pins on the map to tell us about specific locations. So in both cases, the top intersection that was mentioned was the bypass, and most of those comments about people feeling unsafe crossing at the bypass, just in general, speeds being too high. And then we kind of got slightly different results for the online survey and in-person engagement, but we also heard about the Madison Street Bridge being uncomfortable to cross, walking and biking, The Beeline crossing, people have a lot of thoughts about how that could be improved. West 6th Street, people wanted to see some improvements at that crossing. And then for the in-person engagement, we heard about Gorley Pike, Howe Street, and Allen Street. Those were like the next 3 after the bypass. So these were, yeah, we definitely heard about all those intersections throughout the week, and I think we also heard from city staff about some of the issues they already knew about in some of these locations as well. So each of those comments, we added themes to them, tagged them for what people were asking about and saying. And the top 2 themes were pedestrian concerns, so missing narrow or uncomfortable sidewalks, and crossing concerns, so missing or uncomfortable existing pedestrian crossings. And those really made up the bulk of the comments, but there were still plenty of comments on other topics going down from there. But I think overall, just to summarize, what we heard from people is that the street works pretty well if you're driving today, but it doesn't work particularly well if you're walking, and there's a lot of room for improvement, both just to make the sidewalk environment more comfortable and also just to add more crossings so it feels safer to cross the street. So that's the high level overview of what we've been hearing from people about the corridor. I will briefly touch on design objectives. I know we talked about this last time as well, but if we want to talk about this in more detail, we can, but then I'll move to the third section, which will be showing you some of the initial design concepts that we came up with. So just as a reminder, we have 8 different design objectives. There's 4 on this slide and 4 on the next slide. And these are, starting with the first one, we want to reflect community values and corridor identity in our design. We want to advance safety through proven street design. So we know this is a safety first project, so that's really the guiding light is improving safety outcomes on the street. We also want to create a context sensitive street that calms traffic, so understanding what the surrounding land uses and neighborhood context and making sure we're supporting those adjacent land uses. We want to build a continuous multimodal corridor for all users, so not just for people driving, but also for people walking, biking. We want to ensure universal accessibility and comfort along the corridor, making sure that designs meet or exceed ADA and PRO-ACT standards. We also want to support redevelopment and local economic vitality. So we know that there are some larger redevelopment sites that are along the corridor, and we just want to ensure that our design takes those into account and also supports existing local economic vitality along the corridor. And then we also want to strengthen connections to key destinations in the citywide network. So we want this street not to be a barrier, but to feel more like it's part of the network, no matter how you travel. And then the last design objective is to support safe routes to school. There's a number of schools that are close to the corridor and at least one school that's right on the corridor. So we know that our design has to support safe walking and biking to school for students. So those are our 8 design objectives. Last time we met, we asked you to weigh these design objectives, and the top 2 objectives that you told us were advancing safety through proven street design and supporting safe routes to schools, really focusing on that safety aspect of the project. And then that was followed by building a continuous multimodal corridor for all users. And I think that really aligns well with what we've been hearing from the public as well. They feel like speeds are too fast on the street in certain locations, and they want it to work better for everybody, not just for people driving. Okay, so I'll move to our design concepts overview. So while we were in town for workshop week, we spent a couple of days drawing up different sketches and concepts, both cross sections and intersection design drawings, to reimagine what the corridor could look like. And we did this in tandem with city staff, kind of iterating as we went along. And this was just to generate initial concepts and our initial recommendations on how we could make improvements to the street. So there's really 5 key things about the concept design here, five key elements. The first being we want to narrow the street to a 2-lane street wherever possible, where you don't need left turn lanes or medians to allow for more space to have wider sidewalks with a larger buffer from traffic. So that kind of covers the first 2 points. So there's some places where you need left turn lanes, and there's some places where it's nice to have medians, especially if you want to have pedestrian or bicyclist crossings there. But otherwise, it's nice to have a narrower street because you can add in a tree plant between the sidewalk and the street and really create a nicer sidewalk environment than exists today. There are a lot of places today where the sidewalk is narrow or right up against the street or both, and it's pretty uncomfortable to walk in those positions, especially when you have, you know, a large truck coming down the street at 40 miles an hour inches away from you. So that covers the first 2 elements. We also think it's important to add a shared use path on the east side of the street from the existing B-line crossing north to the bypass. South of the B-line crossing, the B-line creates a pretty nice parallel alternative route for bicycling. But north of there isn't a bicycle facility because the trail doesn't continue. And we observed a lot of people biking on the corridor on Rogers, Madison, Kinzer, as it changes names, moving north of the B-line crossing. And it's not a particularly pleasant place to bike, and the speeds are higher on that section of the street. So we think it's important to have a shared use path there to have a separate space for people to bike, so they don't have to bike in street. And then the last 2 elements here are more about intersections. So where feasible, we think it's important to add roundabouts to slow speeds and just have better intersection operations. And then also adding median refuge islands at key pedestrian bicyclist crossings. So together that kind of makes up the 5 key concept elements. And this is just another cross section that we drew up, typical cross section that shows how that 2-lane street could widen to a 3-lane street where we want to have pedestrian median refuge islands to cross the street. The same could also be done where we want to have left turn lanes at intersections. So that's the high-level concepts. We have a lot of different drawings, and we're just going to show you some key drawings at specific locations. This is a really large corridor with a lot of intersections, so we didn't draw up sketches for every single intersection, and we don't plan to, but we will recommend intersection typologies for each intersection where it makes sense to have some sort of change. And so we really think there's 3 main typologies that we would apply. The first being a roundabout, if it's feasible, if there's enough space. The second being reducing the size of a signalized intersection, so if it's possible to remove dedicated turn lanes and just make the intersection more compact, that helps shorten pedestrian crossings and helps everyone get through the intersection more smoothly. And then enhanced pedestrian and bicyclist crossings where there's not a signal or a roundabout. This really applies to greenway crossings or places where there's a clear, pedestrian crossing demand. Especially because people told us there's not enough pedestrian crossings today, we're looking to identify where do we need additional crossings. So we have some pretty good information, some good data, and also good feedback from the public on where those new crossings could be. So with that in mind, I'll go through some of the intersections that we've sketched up here, moving from north to south. So these aren't in any order of priority, it's just moving from north to south. The first one that we drew up is a roundabout at Gorley Pike. And this is what's known as a compact roundabout. So it's a single lane roundabout, and the intersection circle is mountable for very large semi-trucks to turn across that circle. So people in passenger cars, even the fire truck, school bus, medium-sized trucks, they still all go around the circle like you would at a normal single lane roundabout. But because it's a really tight intersection, we have to use a smaller circle for the roundabout, which means it needs to be mountable whenever a large semi-truck comes through there. So some of the benefits of this are speed reduction close to the bypass. There's an existing pedestrian crossing here. A lot of what we heard though is that people don't yield to pedestrians in this crosswalk because they're either rushing to get to the bypass or coming off the bypass. going quite fast, and they just don't yield or stop for pedestrians crossing here. So having a compact roundabout means everybody has to slow down to traverse the roundabout. You have to slow down to, generally speaking, 15 miles an hour to go through the roundabout instead of whatever they are going, 40, 45 miles an hour today past that pedestrian crossing. So we really like this concept. We don't know that it'll fit in that many other places. This is actually one of the minor intersections that has a little bit more space and right of way to fit a compact roundabout. But this was just one idea to get started, kind of creating a gateway as you come in and out of town from the north. The second intersection we sketched up concepts for is at 14th and 15th Street. So in the city's transportation plan, this is a planned greenway. So we would expect, more people walking and biking to cross at this area. The concept that we've come up with is adding a new pedestrian bicyclist crossing at 15th Street, and then having a shared use path on the east side of the street. You can kind of see that like in tan khaki color here. And then folks would continue onto 14th Street over here. So this is often called a offset intersection crossing. We've also added a raised crosswalk at 15th Street for the pedestrian crossing to, again, have another traffic calming feature and increase the likelihood that someone would stop or yield to a pedestrian crossing there. It also just helps with, having pulses of traffic calming as you move throughout the corridor, especially because there's no signal or stop between 11th and 17th in this stretch. So, and there's no crossings. This adds a new pedestrian bicyclist crossing opportunity here at 15. The next intersection we sketched a concept for is 6th Street. And this is very similar to the existing crossing that's at Allen Street on the south end of the corridor, where there's a greenway crossing. So the idea here is that you could still keep a 3-lane cross-section with a median refuge island with bicycle cut-throughs and pedestrian cut-throughs. And the idea being that it makes that crossing as a pedestrian bicyclist feel a lot safer. You can do it in 2 stages, and it also would help with traffic calming. One of the things we heard from a couple of people is that in this stretch, southbound traffic on Rogers Street, because the lane is so wide, sometimes it gets used as 2 lanes. So people will be backed up in 1 lane, and people will kind of fly by in the other lane, and it creates this dangerous situation for pedestrian crossings in this location. The next area we sketched up is the really like 3rd to Kirkwood stretch. And our initial concept idea for this is to have a brick curbless street in this area. So it'd be a much higher level of urban design type treatment in this section. And our thinking for that is that this is really a parallel section to downtown. It feels the most downtown of any of the stretches of Rogers Street. And so really upgrading that section and making it have like a much more downtown feel by creating a curbless street environment could help make it feel, could really support that downtown feel and potential redevelopment in that area. So having brick in this area and have it be curbless, it does a couple of different things. The brick helps with some of the natural traffic calming. People tend to slow down when they're on brick streets. It makes it feel just like a higher aesthetic design, like it's more of a downtown space. And then having it be curbless also helps with flexibility of the street and accessibility. If you wanted to close down a section of it, like for a street festival, for instance, then there's no curb in that area, so it can be used as more of like a street plaza for those types of events. So it helps with helps that flexibility. And then from an accessibility perspective, if somebody has mobility challenges, if the whole street is curbless, for one, all of the parking spaces become accessible because there's no curb, so people can get in and out with wheelchairs to any of those parking spaces. And also, again, if it were closed down for a street festival, then you don't have to go to curb ramps at the corner if you're in a wheelchair or mobility device. The whole street becomes accessible because it's flush. So this is one area that I think we looked at with like there could be like a higher level of design treatment. We haven't figured out all the details of that, but we just really thought of all the sections of the corridor, this one felt like the most downtown section, and so we could potentially have this kind of higher treatment in this section. As part of the project, we're also looking at this portion of 3rd Street from Rogers to College, and looking at initial traffic volumes and operational analysis. The street has excess capacity right now, being a 4-lane street in this section. The traffic volumes are quite low and could easily be serviced by a 2-lane street with a left turn lane at Rogers. So we started drawing up different concepts for this section, but the main concept is to repurpose the outside lanes on 3rd Street in this section to either widen the sidewalks, potentially add a bicycle facility, potentially add landscaping space and tree lawn in that area, which could help with a lot of different things. It could help make the intersections smaller, more compact, and shorten those pedestrian crossings, calm traffic in that area, slow it down, but also just create a better walking environment. It's a pretty unpleasant walking environment along 3rd Street in this section right now because the sidewalk is right up against the outside lane of traffic and it's very narrow. So we're still thinking about different concepts for this one, but kind of the base level concept is to repurpose those outside lanes to make the pedestrian environment better. And then the last concept that we sketched up is a 1-lane roundabout at Patterson. Patterson is one of the intersections that has the most space of any of the intersections along the corridor. It has quite a bit of right of way. And so a 1-lane roundabout could be a great solution here for both traffic calming and traffic operations. So we know, I think in this section, speeds, again, increase a little bit as you're leaving that more downtown area. I think, let me look at my notes, the 85th percentile speed is 38 miles an hour down in this section, so speeds start to get a little bit higher. The speed limit's 30, so we really want people to be going 30 or even lower than that speed for it to be a more pleasant environment for walking. And so our initial concept idea is a 1-lane roundabout here to slow down vehicles passing through this area, facilitate those better pedestrian crossings. It shortens all the pedestrian crossings, so it makes all of the pedestrian crossings 2-stage. So you only ever have to cross 1 lane of traffic because you have those median islands on all the approaches. So that just makes those crossings feel a lot more comfortable than having to cross 3 or 4 lanes of traffic like you do today, which is a much longer crossing. So there aren't, as we need to look into it in a little more detail, there likely aren't other locations that a traditional 1-lane roundabout like this will fit in any of the intersections along the corridor, but this one seems like a good candidate that could potentially be a 1-lane roundabout. So all those concepts are just to kind of show you a flavor of ideas that we came up with, kind of where our thinking is headed. The idea is that they're intended to be both examples of how that intersection could be reconfigured, but also an example of the typology that we would apply to other places where we're not doing an intersection design, but someone could think about that in the future as a future phase of the project. Okay, so I'm happy to go back to any slides anywhere in this presentation, but I'll just really quickly go over next steps and then we can jump into discussion. So for us, for the next 2-3 months, our next steps as a team is to finalize concept design, put together a final report, and then really finish the study sometime in August. So like Hank said, I think we're looking for feedback on this design direction. If we're headed in the right direction, if there's specific intersections that you think are important for the team to look at, and also just, yeah, initial reactions to these designs. Does that cover it, Hank?
Yeah, you got it.
So I'm happy to jump back to any of the design slides for discussion.
Thank you for that presentation. At this time, we will move it to comments from commissioners, feedback on this design direction.
So I have a question on 7th Street. What's the lane width there that when it was redesigned?
10 feet wide.
Okay. So this would be a 1 foot wider, the 11 foot?
Yeah, that was one of the learning lessons of
Okay.
that project, is that for transit vehicles on transit routes, for them to fit side by side, 11 feet is the minimum.
Yeah. And that's still tight, but it's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And the new street behind the Blooming Foods, is that, do you know if that's 10 feet?
The new street behind the Blooming Foods.
On Blooming Foods East has a narrow street.
I'm actually not aware of the lane widths on that street, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
It seemed less than 11.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I will check on that for you.
that's fine. Mr. Flaherty.
Yeah, I had some questions as well. Just from a high level process standpoint, as far as next steps, so the study is finalized by August. What are the final steps, both for this body and for the city as a whole? Like
Yeah.
to wrap up the process.
So this will eventually go through a formal Transportation Commission review and potential approval. Long-term, and so this study will incorporate the long-term vision of what we would like this corridor to look like in the next 10 to 15 years or so. It will also incorporate short-term improvements based on that vision that we could accomplish within the next 1 to 3 years. In terms of next steps and broader city goals related to the transportation plan, city staff is currently going through a more comprehensive review and revision of the transportation plan. And we understand that what comes out of this study and the long-term vision may and probably won't align directly with what is in the current transportation plan. That will be a part of that revision that will go through the necessary processes to have the transportation plan be revised to fit this study.
Okay, thank you. And so as far as like adoption, so to speak, that's with Transportation Commission and staff. Will this get presented to the city council in any fashion, or?
Within the scope of the comprehensive transportation plan review, this would be included. In terms of a separate presentation, we weren't planning on that.
That's totally fine. I was just checking. I had some other questions, but I'll wait until others.
I just had one. Thank you very much, Drew, for your presentation and your work on this project so far. I would be interested in hearing any consideration or thoughts you have about the 2nd Street and Rogers intersection for, I guess, a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't mentioned as kind of one of the case studies here or examples. But, you know, in spite of the fact that that intersection probably doesn't experience a whole lot of pedestrian traffic currently, as hopefully we all know, you know, it's going to be proximate to the Hopewell neighborhood. And so I would expect that in the future that intersection is going to become a lot more busy with foot traffic and others. So, and I know, obviously I'm aware too of, you know, there's kind of related city projects like 2nd Street and so forth. But I was just kind of wondering if there were any conclusions that the consultants, you know, developed about that particular intersection in light of the fact that there's also related projects and then Hopewell being developed.
Drew, would you like to take this one, or do you want me to take it first?
I can take a crack at it, and you could,
All right.
you know,
Sounds good.
add to it. So I think when we were there during workshop week, our direction from city staff was that they already have a project going on at that intersection, and there's, I believe, already a design, and potentially another, like, there's another consultant working on design for that intersection. So it wasn't one that we looked at in detail. We did, you know, walk through the intersection, look at it, but we didn't drop any concepts. But yeah, I don't know, Hank, do you want to say more about that?
That's honestly pretty much it, because the 2nd Street project is in progress. It's been a project that's been on our radar for years now, and it's set to be constructed within the next few weeks or months this year.
Yeah.
This study is looking at 10 years into the future here. Quite honestly, the city most likely won't prioritize another full intersection rebuild within that time frame, since it's getting rebuilt this year.
Okay.
I have a question about funding concern. This process to build design the ideal street and then have that on the shelf, then when funding comes along, we build it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
We understand that there are funding constraints all over the place right now. And so that's why one of the main focuses of the study is not to just look at the dream street we could build, it's to also focus on the short-term improvements that we can do, even if it's not in concrete. Last year, we were awarded about $1.8 million from US DOT for planning and demonstration projects around the city. A lot of that can go towards a project like this, but in terms of quick build and temporary material, not necessarily curb line concrete changes. Additionally, we are looking for other funding opportunities as well. Just last month, the city applied for the 2026 Safe Streets for All implementation grant and asked for about $12 million towards a project like this to incorporate streetscape changes. So we understand that we will not be able to fund this project all at once. We are looking for funding, and if we don't have it, then there are short-term iterative steps that we can take to improve it.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty?
Yeah, so the scope of the study goes from basically the bypass to Country Club.
Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe two questions there. One is just, is the bypass intersection itself included or no, because it's state DOT owned and operated, at least one component of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part was just everything south of Patterson, all the way to Country Club, which is a pretty big stretch. We didn't talk about it all in the recommendations.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'll be included in the what comes next, but just if there's anything of note in that stretch that y'all wanted to share.
Sure. I'll start with the bypass. That is obviously a hot spot that we all know about it. We hear it from stakeholders, we hear it from you all, we hear it from the public. One of the strolls that we took the public on actually went up to the bypass, more so just to show what the current situation is. We know it's not great, but as you said, this is an NDOT controlled intersection and the city is limited in what we can do. Honestly, with this particular project, that was a key discussion point of how much time do we spend designing the city's preferred intersection when we know that we're at the mercy of NDOT in terms of what actually happens. And so that's why we didn't talk about it much tonight. We're focusing on intersections that we as a city can control and we can improve. That said, I have been in talks with NDOT about what's happening in the near and long-term future at that intersection, because I hear things from the public, they need to hear those same things. And so they are aware that intersection was actually identified as, I'm going to get the terminology messed up, but as one of the higher risk intersections around the state. And so they are taking an extra look at it later this year to do their own study of sorts on it to figure out what they would like to see long term. I don't know exactly what that entails, but I'm hopeful that with collaboration between NDOT, planning, and engineering staff, that we can communicate to them what we're hearing and what we as a city would prefer to happen there.
Great. That might also be a place where even just mayoral or council engagement with like the governor's office or others could be helpful.
Maybe.
To be like, hey, this is need some support here. Yeah. Okay.
In terms of your other question about other sites along the corridor that we didn't discuss, was there anything in particular you wanted me to touch on?
No, just if there was anything of note, yeah. Since it was a big swath that we didn't really talk about.
We also, and again, the sketches that Drew showed were just examples of what we could do at potential locations. We either have or plan on designing in more detail the Country Club Country Club and Rogers intersection, the Rockport and Rogers intersections. So those are the two main ones on the south side, but also looking at the intersections of Graham and Ralston and Duncan and Cherokee and Chambers. Those are all uncontrolled intersections that either have a a direct or indirect connection to the Beeline, a connection to Switchyard Park. And so there are, right now the Switchyard Park entrance is getting revamped and improved for pedestrian crossings, but there are areas along that stretch of the corridor that you don't have a legal crosswalk within a lot of feet from where you want to go. Let's improve that, because we know that folks in the Broadview neighborhood want to get around. They want to get to the Beeline. That's a key feature for them. Let's help them get there more easily.
Thank you. Other commissioner comment?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Leslie?
I had a question about the proposed brick curbless section between 4th and 5th. As a wheelchair user, I am all for a curbless street. Also, as a wheelchair user, I encounter a lot of brick sidewalks that just don't hold up. Do brick streets fare any better? I mean, really old ones do, but you know what I mean? Like, Drew, you may know better than I do.
Yeah. There's someone at Tool Design who has a lot more experience with brick than I do, so I don't know as much about it, but he has told me a lot of it has to do with like subgrade and how they're built and the pattern of the bricklaying. And so some of the ones that you see that are older were built at a time when that was done right, I guess. And yeah, some examples don't have as good of subgrade, or the pattern is not the right pattern for how vehicles track and move across them, and then it knocks out bricks, and then that starts a chain reaction. But to your point, I think what's not obvious in this drawing is that the sidewalks here are shown in concrete because we understand that brick is not a good sidewalk surface, so it's more for the roadway bed. But I think what I'll also say is that this is more of just an example of having a different design aesthetic treatment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be brick. Brick is nice, but it could be some other type of material, or I guess potentially a different type of paver. It also doesn't have to be brick. It was more just to illustrate like this is that more downtown environment, so something different, so people realize the space is different and is downtown, not like a through street.
Yeah, and I really appreciate thinking about something like this, especially in light of our conversation that we're going to have next about Kirkwood and what would make a portion of a street really ideal for closing off for events. And brick is nice, but curbless is even nicer. So thanks for adding that.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
I think I just had one more question, which is about Country Club. Since that's at the border of the city limits, how much, I guess, control does the city have of that intersection versus the county? Would that involve a partnership with the county to, like, let's say, for example, let's say there was a determination or a desire to construct a roundabout there, that would necessarily involve a total. You can't build half a roundabout on the intersection. Like you could widen the sidewalks on half the intersection, or remove a turn lane on one part of the intersection. But what kinds of conversations, if any, have you already had with the county about it?
So we haven't talked to the county about that intersection. We have talked to them about the Madison Street Bridge and what we could do there, and those have been very, very productive. I'm excited about that.
That's good.
As far as Country Club, honestly, we haven't gotten that far in terms of where exactly does right-of-way end, where does the county begin. It is a city-controlled intersection.
Okay.
That said, with almost any, I don't want to say almost any, but with most roundabout constructions, there will be some right-of-way acquisition just because roundabouts are big. And so I imagine not even just with the county, but with adjacent property owners, there would need to be those discussions.
Okay.
I want to come back to the bridge, the bypassing Kinzer intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that NDOT has plans to replace the bridge that ends on Gurley Pike in the next few years. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about that intersection. I've gone over it on foot and on bike, sort of a bridge to nowhere project now. Gurley is busy, and there are long-term transportation plans to go through to Arlington Mobile Park.
Yep.
So this seems, I feel like one of the best opportunities there is to move the bridge, as long as you're going to take it down. The best place to put it is at Kinzer and the bypass.
Yep.
I'm a high school parent. I've gone through that intersection a lot on bike and on foot. Not only is it a high crash intersection, but I've seen a lot of people using it.
Yep.
And I feel like there's no better time than what we're doing now with this corridor to say, look, we're working really hard to make this a pedestrian-friendly corridor. This is a high crash intersection. It feels like a great opportunity to propose putting the bridge there.
Can I just pile onto that slightly, which is that, we explored with relative depth converting Cascades into at least partial or all of a multi-use path to be the route that got to the high school, and that's sort of run its course and not happened. And Kinzer is also really well suited to that, the east side of Kinzer, because there are less hills and very few drive cuts. We've already talked about recommending an east side of the street multi-use path all the way up to the bypass. So
yes, and also as a
on.
high school parent, I have tried every different way to bike commute to school.
Yeah.
And the problem with the Cascades is the big hill. And Kinzer is a flatter route. And you're going to be late for school. You're going to want to get there at the last minute, right? So you're going to take the fastest, shortest route. So that route needs to be safest. And for all those reasons, I think if we can pile on to proposing that we would like a bridge to be at the intersection for almost no cost if they're going to tear it down and rebuild it.
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about what discussions have been, and then what we are thinking for next steps here. So, in talks with NDOT, there are feasibility concerns on their end of moving the bridge too far east, just because of the topography of the land on either side of the bypass and how they're going to do it relatively inexpensively. They are going to move the bridge over a certain amount of feet. It's hard to talk about without visualizing it, but Gorley Pike, west of Kinzer, travels west, and then there's a little jog in it where it goes north and then west again. So and then the bridge is further west of that.
Yes.
What NDOT is proposing as kind of a compromise is they will move the bridge over from where it is currently over to that jog in Gorley Pike. So it's not exactly what we would like as a city, but that's, I think, the best we're going to get. We are going to continue to try, but I think we've hit a wall on that one. In terms of a grade separated crossing at Kinzer and the bypass, because that's what we're talking about. Whether it's a tunnel, whether it's a bridge, we would like something that is a grade separated for vulnerable road users to get around, under, or over the bypass, right? Because that is right now about a 110-foot crossing across about 8 lanes of traffic or so. It's a lot. And so as part of this past Safe Streets for All implementation grant, one of the projects that we applied for was a multi-use path from Gorley and Kinzer that travels down to Gorley to Old 37, under the bypass, and then up west, north of the bypass on NDOT right-of-way up to Kinzer. And NDOT has sent in a letter of support. We would be using the right-of-way, and there would obviously need to be some permitting and agreements there, but they are largely supportive of that project. And right now, that seems to be the most feasible way to create a grade separated crossing at that intersection.
Okay. Thank you.
You said just to clarify, taking Gorley down to Old 37.
Yes.
So not at the intersection exactly, but the closest thing to it.
Yeah.
Got it. And for NDOT, is it primarily cost constraint driven, this idea of moving it just slightly to the Gorley bike jog versus to the Kinzer intersection itself? And I wonder if a partner, like a match, could change that conversation as well.
Their constraint has been feasibility. That said, feasibility and cost go hand in hand. I mean, anything can be feasible if you have the money to do it. But this is something that honestly has not been matching a cost to repair this bridge has not been on the city's radar because we already have so many projects that we would like to construct. I'm not sure if it would be a priority for us, but it hasn't been a real conversation yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it is special with the grocery store on one side and like a lot of housing on the other.
Right.
When I've seen people going across, they're just doing what they need to do to feed themselves. Okay.
Just on that note, when we were out walk at the intersection, so I would assume part of it is just topographical feasibility, because where it is today, Gorley Pike is above the bypass and the bridge goes over. But at Kinzer Pike, it's like the area around the street is depressed, and there's like a drainage ditch area. So when we were out there, we were thinking, oh, well, an underpass would be easier here. But obviously, that's like way more expensive and complicated. So my guess would be it has more to do with grades and the ability to ramp up to a bridge at a gentle slope, 2% slope would be like really difficult. That was my guess.
Yeah. Drew, I have a question for you on capacity. Anticipating some people who are interested in driving will be interested to know how do these designs anticipate changing capacity? I understand the roundabouts may improve flow for cars. There was at least one traffic calming device, the bricks. Do we anticipate more congestion with this design? How many cars, will we be changing the number of cars that are able to move through it?
No, we're not repurposing any of the lanes. Right now it operates as a 2-lane street with left turn lanes, so we wouldn't be proposing removing any left turn lanes. We're just proposing narrowing it. So we still have one through lane in either direction. And I have to pull up the numbers from the last time, from our first presentation, but I can pull them up briefly in a second here. As I recall, the traffic volume, the highest traffic volume is 11,000 vehicles per day, and the lowest is 9,300 vehicles per day from what we recorded. So typically, the carrying capacity of a 2-lane street with left turn lanes is up to 25,000 vehicles per day, so we're less than half of that threshold. So there's plenty of capacity with a 2-lane street, and we're not changing that.
And with the traffic calming, it's not so much that it's really about taking speeding and bringing it down to the intended speed, right?
Right. It's about changing the design to match the posted speed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Anyone else?
I have a last one.
Go ahead.
Which is just about interaction with the transportation plan. I know you mentioned, Hank, Mr. Duncan, the broader updates you all are looking at. Something that kind of came up in the context of Hopewell discussions, and I think you all are looking at, is this idea that we have existing conditions and we have street topologies with cross sections that don't always match what's possible, even with a street change. That we need some flexibility there that doesn't undermine our goals with respect to what a street becomes. And so I'm curious about, I know you all are already looking at those, what type of mechanisms we would need for flexibility in that context. Also curious how something like a corridor study then interacts. So if you're looking at just a stretch and you say, okay, something we could do here is basically widen the sidewalks from 5 feet to 6 feet, put in a 5-foot tree plot, and that's all we could do. And right now it's monolithic sidewalks. We don't really have a mechanism to allow for that exactly. So what would that look like? Would this corridor study basically supersede and say this is the more detailed look at this? And so, general urban street topology notwithstanding, we use this corridor study to guide decisions on this street.
Like which comes first?
Yeah, or how do they interact? And it might all change when we do a transportation plan update. Do you have feedback on that, though?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Honestly, I don't have a definitive answer for you yet, but based on how detailed these corridor studies are and how much feedback we are getting from the community specifically about these corridors when we are looking into them, my guess would be that these studies would supersede what is in the general transportation plan, just because we've done the deep dive look. This is not just a general look at what we would like in the city. We know, or the goal is to know what the community wants and what fits our goals best on this specific corridor.
I could expand on that. Ryan Miller, Planning Services Manager. The transportation plan actually gives the planning and transportation director power to override the transportation plan in design criteria. And so this would, we would assume that the director would then default to this until the transportation plan matched. So the idea would be that this new corridor study plan would be the plan going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. I believe we've reached the end of our commissioner comment. Hank, it's my understanding that we don't need, this is a report, we're not acting on it. Great, thank you. At this time, public comment is optional. We can engage it through a majority vote. Is
I'd like to move to allow public comment.
Okay,
I'll second it.
all right. We'll just do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? None. All right. Is there anyone in the room or online who would like to make public comment? You can have up to 3 minutes.
I have a see it on this screen.
I see one hand from Paula Rousseau. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, thanks for letting me say something. I strongly oppose roundabouts. Please don't build any roundabouts. They create an expectation among motor vehicle drivers that they won't have to stop usually. There's an expectation of not stopping. There's oftentimes a failure to yield. My experience with roundabouts in the city already is hair-raising. So besides being, I was not hit in a roundabout, but every other time that was the most dangerous for me in the last 3 years was in a roundabout. I don't know why you're proposing them, but they're bad news. I'll be glad to give you research if you want to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else at this time who would like to make public comment?
I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom.
None? All right. In that case.
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh, yes,
Oh,
I can.
yes.
Hey, this is Buff Brown.
All right,
Can you
Buff.
hear me?
Yes, Buff Brown, you have 3 minutes.
All right, I would raise my hand, but I can't find the hand.
It's under
I
reactions.
still can't
But it's
find
okay.
it, but I found the unmute. Oh, okay, I just want to introduce myself. I just now tuned in. So I really did not see much of the material, but I just want to tell you a little bit about me because I am going to be speaking in the next session, and I think I want to keep it short so that so that I don't have to reintroduce myself. But just so you know, so I grew up in Bloomington, raised my kids there. I now live in Portland, Oregon. I have been a transportation planner for 25 years. So I'm contacting you from Portland. For decades, I've been involved with Bloomington Transportation. I was a traffic commissioner in the 90s, and I ran a group called Bloomington Transportation Options for People from 2004 to 2014, where we advocated for bike ped in transit. BTOP had a major contribution to the downtown parking policy, and I would say that we were involved in many of the bike lanes that exist in your town. So I still keep in touch with Bloomington transportation issues. The two things I would like to say is roundabouts are actually, really good safety features. You know that from data, but they can be too big. I really argued that the one on South Rogers and Sarah Road was excessively large for the traffic that was necessary, that the one that's actually on Hillside and help me out here, the neighborhood.
Renwick.
Thank you, Renwick is the right size for many of the transportation needs of Bloomington. People go through it slowly. It's very possible to go through it easily on a bike because people travel quite slowly. And I'm sure it has the fewest wrecks. In fact, an analysis that I did about 10 years ago showed it was significantly less crashes than the other roundabouts, which are larger. I do like a lot of the things that you are proposing. Tool Design is an excellent consultant, so I'm really glad to see what they're proposing so far, what I've seen here. So those are all my comments, and I'll have more for you at the 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other public commenters who'd like to speak?
I am not seeing any.
Okay, before we adjourn, for anyone listening who's interested in talking about Kirkwood, that's a separate meeting of the same group that starts at 7 p.m. and due to rules, we don't start that early, we start it on time. With that said, we're done with this session and we will adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.